Hey, good evening. How are you guys doing tonight? That's fantastic. How many of you were here last night and saw Dr. Hud? Okay, so for those who were not, we are happy to have Dr. Hud McWilliams with us again. Over 50 years as a clinical psychiatrist, also 40 years plus as a pastor, seminary professor, leadership consultant, literally has touched the lives of thousands and thousands of people, helping them become emotionally and spiritually healthy from the inside out. So please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Hud McWilliams.
Whoa. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Before we start, would it be okay if I pray for you?
Please.
Okay. Father, I just want to thank you for who you are. God, I thank you. I know that many of us walk into a room, and when we hear the word Father, we think of our earthly father. And maybe our Father was distant. Maybe our Father was unavailable, Lord. But I thank you that you are the perfect Father. You're the perfect example of what a father is, Lord. I thank you even more that you have adopted us into your family. So, God, I pray for tonight, Lord. I pray that all of the things that have happened today, all of the things that might be on our mind of what we have to do afterwards, Lord, remove them right now. Let us not focus on that. Let us focus on you. God, we know that one of the most powerful things in this world is a family that is on mission together for what you want them to do in this world. So God, I pray that you help us be people who leave here not only informed, but empowered to make a difference in our families, not just for our good, but ultimately for your glory. In your son's name, amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to do a little recap of last night. It won't be all of last night because that would take all of tonight. I don't want to do that. But I do want to talk about a few things. First thing is, when you talk about parenting, it's about parents. It's not about the kids. So if I can say it one more time, you can't give away what you don't have yourself. Most of what this is about tonight is checking your own system to make sure that you are carrying the kind of things that you want to be able to give to your children. You can't give to them something you don't have, so that's so significant. It's so important. And if you've got a messed up background like you prayed about, or we have a distorted view of parents from our own parents, or I think most people, Nancy and I started off that same way. We didn't want to parent the way we were parented. And we thought we were going to be better than they were. And, we did in some ways, but then we made some pretty significant mistakes. And, you've got to get up from that, but you have to have some idea of what you're doing. And so that's what this is for tonight. Hopefully during Q&A, you can take this QR code and write some questions, and we'll try to handle them or respond to them at the last, because I think that's where we can clarify some things. You can't possibly get at all the stuff that you need to get at. So that's the first part. As parents, this really is a class for you, not for your kids. Does that make sense? All right, the second thing is, last night I drew a picture. I thought it was a good picture. It was a little scribbly, actually, and it'll probably be scribbly again. But the picture is trying to describe to you how every child on the planet that's born is at risk for growing up poorly. Everyone. There's not a child that is born that's ready. And it takes a long time for humans to develop. And so we're so slow at it. And part of the reason we're so slow is because we're so complicated. If we weren't complex, then it probably wouldn't matter that much. But an amoeba, for instance, comes into the world ready to go. You don't have to do anything. It's just fully prepared, set. That's all it's going to get. It doesn't get much better. That's it. It's maxed out. But not a human. A human starts slow, stays slow, takes a long time to develop, and I think that's what frustrates a lot of us. We want it to be faster. One of the hard things for me as a parent was when my kids were little, I was always anticipating the next thing they did. And anticipating the next thing they did meant that I was normally missing what they actually were doing. Instead of just delighting in where they were, I was hoping they would be ready to do this, and then ready for that, and then ready for the next thing. And I was missing being present. So that's our job. Our job is to take care of our own souls so that we can be ready, present, able to resource somebody that's at high risk by definition, right? So what I really want to give to you by the time tonight's over is how can you help your kids be at low risk for dealing with the difficulties of life. And life's difficult. Life's a struggle. Life's full of pain. Life's full of disappointment. Life has losses in it. Life has movement. There's lots of transition. You can't eliminate those things. And so one of the things I said last night, or tried to say, was you have to be willing to allow your child to be in pain. And that means that you have to know what that's like for yourself. How do you manage the discomfort of life, the disappointments of life, the things that are not fair? How do you manage when somebody disagrees with you and you need to navigate and to have a dialogue, to get to a collaborative place where you can get along with somebody? And we have trouble in our culture right now having any kind of conversation about anything that's controversial. Religion, politics, child rearing, doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, it's hard for us to have those emotional conversations. And that's just part of the story. So those are skills. And so tonight I'm going to give you, before we get done, I'm going to give you a package of elements that need to be handled by every person on the planet if they're going to be at low risk instead of high risk. Every child is at high risk for dependency. See if I can explain this. Dependency is the core disorder of every addiction. And a dependency disorder, no matter what you're addicted to, a dependency disorder simply means that you're functioning like a little child. You're dependent. You're not independent. You're not a whole person. You're not willing to take responsibility for yourself. You're dependent on something, dependent on drugs, dependent on work, dependent on your finances, dependent on something, right? And actually, to control people, you want them to be dependent. And if you think about it, I said last night, I think, you can't control a child. By the way, you can't control your mate. I just thought I'd say that because a lot of us try really desperately to do that, and it doesn't work. It didn't work for me. I'm still trying, and I'm 60 years married, so come on. The point is dependency is at the forefront. Now we have to move from dependency to something else, to hopefully independency and then the ability to be interdependent. We don't want to be codependent. That pushes us back into the dependency model. And so last night I talked about and used this idea that the very first level of parenting is caretaking. You need to take care of a dependent child to give them enough nurture and enough support and enough comfort that they can actually take the risk to grow. And it's interesting that even infants are highly impacted by this. So I thought I would give you a short little example of what happens in a NICU unit with a premature baby. I have a friend of mine who had a premature baby, and the kid was in the NICU unit. Do you know what that is? Okay, so it's amazing. You know, what's gestation period is 40 weeks, and these kids were born 20, 21, 26, somewhere in there, and so they're just little tiny. I mean, they weigh 15 ounces or something, you know, and so when they are in the NICU unit, in order to help them survive, they get monitored like crazy. And part of the monitoring means that they're intruded upon either with lines or monitoring things, and you know, so almost every person that touches that infant is in some way invading their space. Now I don't know, you know, culturally we differ, but one of the interesting things is almost all of us have a feeling about personal space, and when somebody invades our personal space, they get a little too close, then we get a little uncomfortable. I had a client one time that said, I don't think this counseling is intense enough. I thought, oh, so you think it should be more intense? That's what I thought, you know. So I got up and I walked across the room, stood right in front of her, and started to sit on her lap. And she kind of squealed, and I said, is that intense enough for you? You know, I mean, is that what you're looking for? Well, the whole point is therapy is not about intensity. It's, you can make somebody intense, right? That's not the point. So this little NICU kid is poked and probed and tested, and and they have tubes down their throat and all kinds of stuff. Now, if that kid survives, in this particular case, the kid did, and the kid at pre-toddler, let's say 10 months, what would be a 10-month-old by the time they get out of the NICU unit? They're usually 3 or 4 months into life anyway. So by the time I was talking to the mother was saying, I can't bond with this kid. This kid will not cuddle. Just kind of always like this. Now, this is a pre-verbal 10-month-old, right? Hasn't even learned how to say no. Learned some things, but probably not that. You following me? So, what we've learned is that child at a super early age learned that anybody that approaches him is going to invade him in some way, going to violate him in some way, going to intrude upon his world in some way, push a line into him or push a needle into him or something. And so psychologically, you can understand that the kid is saying, I don't want you to do that. Don't pick me up because it's going to hurt or it's going to be uncomfortable or it's going to be intrusive in some way. A kid has to learn to differentiate between somebody that's trying to help him, which was the reason they're in the NICU unit and they can survive, and it's a phenomenal miracle that we can do that, and then being able to psychologically open up. It was interesting that a therapist worked with this kid while they were young, real young, and about 14, 16 months, something like that. With some intervention from this therapist, the kid began to realize that not everybody was going to violate him. And it was done with toys. We call it play therapy. And this play therapist helped this kid begin to play with an adult. The mother didn't know how to do that. She just wanted to hold and care and cuddle and be a caretaker. But it's not easy to be a caretaker. You have to understand what's going on inside of the child. And to see the world from that child's life took some doing. This mother came in. I saw it on a video. And this kid, for the first time, turned to her and put his head on her chest and cuddled with her. And it just blew the mother's mind because it's the first time this kid had ever been warm, basically. And it wasn't that the kid didn't want it, and it wasn't that the mother didn't give it. It's hard to read how somebody's perceiving their world. And the therapist figured out this kid feels like every time an adult moves toward him, he's going to be invaded. Now, some of you have stories, not like that maybe, but stories similar to that in terms of the way you perceive things. So we're going to talk about perception in a few minutes. And one of the key elements in a child's life is how they perceive things. So perception becomes this huge piece of the puzzle, but it starts during this caretaking period. We know that we can feed kids and give them warm beds and take care of them by changing their diapers and take care of all their physical needs, and they will still choose to give up life. They will actually choose to die rather than to live if they're not taken care of in a nurturing kind of a way. And there still is data that comes out that's related to that a child decides whether this is a safe place to be in, whether this is an okay place to live. And you think, really, they can decide that? Well, yes, they can. And some of you have had experience with older people that, one mate will die and then a week or two later, the other one dies. Why? Because they don't want to go on without them. And so it's like you have control over some of that to a degree. Are we having fun yet? I don't know why I'm in such a morbid subject, but, let's enjoy it for what it is. Okay. So, being able to navigate the structure of life, which is a struggle and a challenge, and it has pain in it. We think a lot of times that we need to protect our kids from that pain. And I would say one of the things that children need is they need to experience life at their level in full as it's possible to do. Well, so last night we talked about 2 stages. One is the caretaking stage, and the second one was the COP stage. Well, most people stop their development as parents or caretakers in some way, stop their development at the COP stage. Very little parenting advice gets out of the COP stage because we're trying to control. And I said, at what age does that start, the COP stage? 8 to 10, that's right. Okay, so I drew some kind of a silly diagram like this, and I said, if that's normal development, and this is maturity, and this is age, that the older a child gets, the more you expect out of them in terms of behavior and responsiveness, etc. So you have this first period of time which is non-verbal, and the nonverbal time is where the caretaking takes place. So the caretaking is the first space, and that's number 1, and then number 2 comes after that. So we get about age 10 or so, I said last night, I think, something like that. And at age 10, we begin this COP stage. We begin to say, you can't do this, you can't do that. So we start saying no to them. And saying no is necessary, keep them out of the street, because no child can decide that on their own, so we have to help them do that. And if you really do care about them, you won't let them go in the street. I don't care how much of a tantrum they throw. Is that right? They can be mad at you, they can, make your life miserable, whatever else, but it's your responsibility not to let them run out in the street, because the car's going to win every time. So the idea of being a cop means that you have to begin to corral them in some way and teach them that the world has, here's the word, limits. All of us have limits. There's a song, I think it's a Bob Dylan song, it says, you got to serve somebody. We don't like that. We don't like to have limits. We don't want limits put on us. I'm a rebel. I married a rebelette. 2 rebels in the same house cause some friction sometimes. There's little sparks and stuff like that. Because we don't like to be told what to do. We like to be asked. So Nancy will say something like this, do you want to take the trash out? And my answer is always the same, no. I do not want to take the trash out. You could ask me if I will. Of course I will. Sure I will. I'm willing to do it. I just don't want to do it. So the way you ask it does matter, right? So the cop stage means that you have to have some understanding of what this little person is, what they're dealing with, how they see the world, how their personality is structured, how sensitive they are, how non-sensitive they are, how upset they are, how frustrated they are in their own skin. You've got all kinds of stuff going on. And so the cop stage is this stage that has the desire to control without the ability to control, ultimately. And it's usually at this stage where parenting goes off the rail in some way. If a kid can get through this without you tying them to the sofa, I had a child one time in a classroom. I actually bought a seat belt for his seat so he would stay in it, because he was ADHD on steroids and he wouldn't sit still. And I said, just put your seatbelt on, you'll be fine. And the chair would bounce around, but at least he was in his chair, So here's the cop phase. And it's kind of this next age of development, right? And that first stage of life, those first stages of life, the child has no real protection, which is what it means to be parenting. That's what parenting's about. It's protecting a child who can't protect themselves. Most damage from a psychological standpoint starts here, and people don't like this. I don't like this either. I don't even like to take people's histories. I know I need to, and I do, and it's important. I understand it, but it's like we're trying to blame the past. This is not about blaming. This is about understanding. So the goal is to understand the child. The goal is to read them correctly. The goal is to be a student of your child. That takes time, and it takes presence. And it means that if you're going too fast and you have no space and there's not time around the table, there's not time to play games, there's not time to talk, there's not time to read out loud, there's not time to get away from devices, there's not time to, instead of being fed with something, you generate the relational context. You generate the space for this. It used to be, before I was born, most children on the planet were raised by probably 15 to 18 normally close related people of all ages. Did I say that? Do I need to say that again? Did you get that? That was a long sentence. All right. 15 to 18 people, usually related to you in some pretty close way, like parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, nieces, cousins. And then And there wasn't much to interfere with that. You're in a point in history that it's lucky a lot of times where a kid will have one or two primary caretakers. And usually they're divided in some way by work. I mean, if both parents work and then we have daycare and on, you can hear what I'm telling you. You don't have enough collaborative space and enough dialogue to develop the lack of dependency in this environment. So it means that parenting is really the level of parenting, the level of demand for parenting is really, the bar has been raised significantly by a cultural context. The kids haven't changed a bit. We haven't changed a bit, but the context has changed. And where you could used to rely on aunts and uncles and whatever, one of the greatest tutors in my whole life was my uncle on my dad's side. It was my father's brother, and he was the chief of the fire department in Denver, Colorado, and he taught me how to do plumbing work and electrical work, and then he sang and I sang, and so we'd sing together, and my dad would sing with us, and then we'd sing these trios at weddings and funerals, and sometimes we got confused whether we were a wedding or a funeral, but we still sang, but I learned all this stuff from my uncle because my father overworked. And he was a great father. I'm not knocking him, really. That's the whole point. I loved him, he loved me, but he worked too much. He played ball in high school, and he was captain of the football team and what have you. And I played ball, and he couldn't go to my games because he had to work on Saturdays. But my uncle could come. So I had the influence of an extended family, and that influence was significant in my being reared as a child. And most of you can tell stories like that. You have somebody, someplace, somewhere that reached into your world and affirmed you in some way. And maybe it was a coach, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was somebody down the block, a parent of some other child that they couldn't parent their own child, but they could help you. I just think we are in significantly difficult times, and the challenges that we're talking about now is greater. So in a little bit, I'm going to give you 7 things that make up a healthy person. But part of it is understanding the context in which this takes place. So this period of time, these first 10 so years in a person's life are so critical because you can't protect yourself as a child. You don't have a defense, really. This one little kid I was telling you about out of the NICU had a physiological response to, I'm just got to protect myself from being hurt or poked or invaded in some way. As we grow up, psychologically, it's much harder to figure out what that is. Sometimes, I remember a kid down the block who's, you kind of had to walk into his house with a tester. You wanted to see how the wind was blowing because his mother sometimes was wonderful and sometimes she was terrifying. And and so I didn't know how to read her. And I'd usually stand out on the porch, and then she was confused why I wouldn't come in the house. Well, I think you're going to kill me. I don't know. I don't know whatever a kid thinks at that point in time, especially boy children. I mean, that was a little problematic, so there you go. Okay, so the cop phase is this phase that we get stuck in because most of us want to control in some way. And this is not about control. This is about nurturing. Nurturing something takes time. Most of us are in too big a hurry. Almost all of our anger is generated by lack of time. Did you know that? It's triggered. Come on, we're going to be late. Nancy and I had an argument going to the airport just a couple days ago. So there it is. It doesn't go away. But it's time. It's that time squeeze that does it. And we don't like to give ourselves enough space to do that. So I'm going to go back to, it used to be that we could sit around the table and talk or play games which are interactive and present. A lot of my counseling right now is done on Zoom and FaceTime. And it's not nearly as good as sitting across the table from you at Starbucks. It's a whole different impact. It's not that it's worthless. It's not. It's okay. It's what we have today, but it diminishes the substance of it, the quality of it, the intensity of it. And these kids, any kid, needs to learn how to have dialogue and how to be collaborative. Does that make sense? So one of the things we did when we were raising our kids is we made them get up early. And they sure fussed at the first. But it just became matter of fact. We're going to eat breakfast together every morning. You don't get to vote. Now, if you need 30 minutes to get ready, fine. If you need an hour, that's okay. Whatever. But we'll start with this. And it became a ritual, if you will, and it left a legacy. And we'd play games, and we'd have conversation, and you have to be creative, but we ate breakfast every morning together. And then when I was teaching university, I was teaching at Southern Methodist University, and there were 250 kids in the class, and we got on some subject, and I remember asking them, how many of you, growing up, ate at least one meal together a day with your family? And there were only about 25 out of 250. And this was in the 80s. Then I asked how many ever ate two, like breakfast and dinner. And I think there were one or two maybe that had that kind of experience. Do you know what, from a biblical standpoint, Jesus spent more time at a table with people than almost anything else. I read an article the other day and it said, Jesus ate his way through the Gospels. He was always sitting around and eating something, and he was apparently a pretty good cook. He cooked for his disciples. I think it was fish, but anyway. The point is, that's where connection takes place. That's the incubator for life. And we've removed that right now. So we do fast foods and we do drive-by and we try to cram in, 16 soccer matches. I had one friend, he's really into baseball and he likes to coach, and he's got 4 boys, and he had 14 games in 1 week. Yeah, wow. I didn't want to ask him who won because it would take 14 times as long just for him to report it, and that would be some more wasted space. But anyway. All right. So this is vulnerable. That's the point I'm trying to make. This period of life is vulnerable. If there are negative influences, like I said last night, you have a curve that instead of going up, winds up being flat, but I didn't draw it flat on purpose so that you can understand that what happens over time is that diminishes if nothing intervenes. If something intervenes at any point in time in life, and I don't care what age we're talking about out here, you can start this trajectory that way. So that's the whole point of development. So if you missed out on stuff as a child, and if your parents died when you were 3 because they were killed in an accident or something, then that's not your fault. But it has the impact of you being an orphan. And orphans have a different trajectory of life to deal with. It's just a whole other thing. Is it impossible to deal with it? No. It's biblically talked about a lot. God adopts us into his family. So the adoption language and that whole configuration of thing bears weight on this, but the whole point is at any point in time you can participate in being a healthy person. Okay, so the cop phase is fun, kind of. The next phase, I should give it to you quickly, is called a coach. So the third phase would be coaching, and it's when the kid's into adolescence somewhere. I don't know whether it's 13 or 14 or something, but it's like the next piece of this puzzle, and that's the coach. Now, a coach has some unique things. And probably the most significant is that a coach is not allowed to play the game. Do you hear me? You can't do for a child what they must do for themselves. If you try to compensate for them, the referee's going to blow the whistle, and your team's going to go backwards on the field. You are not allowed to play the game. You can be in shape, you can be current, you can be paid up, you can be ready, you can be read up, you can have the data, you can have all the experience you need, etc., but you're not allowed to step foot on the court or the playing field. That child has to play the game. And if you're a good coach, you're going to read your players well. I marvel at good coaches because I had some that were good and I had some that weren't good. I had some that didn't know how to motivate me because I was motivated in a different way than some other students. And it didn't mean that kicking one student in the backside that would motivate them, and then patting the other on the shoulder pads would motivate them. And so, you have to find out who's what. And some kids learn the hard way. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, but some of us just learn the hard way. We just continually take the hard way. And it's not bad or good. It's just there's a consequence to it, and face it, own it, deal with it. It's not like, oh, that's bad, and then this one's good. I've seen people that were what I call goody-goody two-shoes. They got great grades, and they were wonderful, and everybody loved them, but they were a mess inside because they never developed. They were playing the game for everybody else and not for themselves. A coach wants the player to succeed in the best way possible, and so they'll be writing them to produce the best they can out of that child, or best they can out of that player. And I don't know if you follow pro sports, but pro sports, the players move around. And what they're doing is they're trying to find a place that they fit. Because you don't always fit in some ways, or you feel out in some ways. So coaching is this unique period of time. It's interesting how many people can't shift as parents from being a cop to coaching. Because here's what you have to do. You have to open your hands. You have to let go. You have to say, all right, here's $1.50, cross the street and, buy an ice cream cone, and I'm not going to be with you. We've crossed the street 100 times now. I think you can do it. And we hold on and we hope that they can do it, Well, they have to take risks, don't they? And they have to fail. And I'd just like to pause here and make a little editorial comment about failure. I think biblically, God built failure into his creation, and he expects us to fail. And the response to failure is to get up, because it's the best way to learn. Hands down. We don't like to fail. We think failure is horrible. I don't think failure is bad at all. I think failure is just a normal process in life. And I told you last night, every child that learns how to walk fails more than they succeed for a period of time. And it's the way you learn how to walk. And how many of you walk? Yeah, good. There's a few of you who can admit it, How'd the rest of you get in here? I don't know. But the idea is the coach comes along, and what he offers us is he offers us an observation, I guess would be the way to say it. A good coach can observe things that you're doing or not doing. And if you trust the coach, listen to my language, if you trust the coach, it will come out of whether you've been a peace officer as a cop or whether you've been a brutal rule keeper, right? The peace officer is to protect, to bring peace to that child's world until they can get strong enough to enter the game. I was watching some owls in my neighborhood, And owls are weird-looking babies. I don't know if you've ever seen an owl. You know, they have legs about this long and this little round ball of a body. And they just stand there. I mean, they're just perched on this thing, and they're way up in this tree. And eventually they learn how to fly. But they don't start flying right away. If Mama Owl or whoever's in charge of them, I don't know, pushed them off the branch, what would happen? Most of them would die, right? Because they're not ready yet. You know, when their wings are ready, fine. They'll take the down out of the nest and they start flying, but they have to be ready. So the cop phase is to get somebody ready to what? To be coached. And if you are on your game as a parent, you will recognize in your own life whether you got coached or not. My uncle was really good at coaching me. My dad was really good at coaching me. My mother was really good at coaching me. And there's numerous reasons. I mean, I'd love to sit up here and talk about myself for a while, simply because we all like to do that, but it's good to explore that and have some understanding of where did you get this and where was this stopped and who failed to encourage you. If I want my team to win, I want you to produce the best thing you can do. So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to not be afraid to let you fail. I'm going to hopefully give you the skills you need to do this task. I was listening to two world-class athletes be interviewed. At the very end of the interviewer said this to them. He said, we only have a couple minutes. I'd like you to give me your view of coaching at your level. Now, they're at the highest level, in the world champions. One was a tennis player, one was a football player. And both of them said, we can't get good enough coaching. They're the best in the world. And they knew they couldn't play the game at top form without input. How many kids are resistant? They don't want any input. Don't tell me what to do. Me do myself. That's a 3-year-old. So when a 12-year-old's saying, me do myself, you know how functionally old they are, right? They're 3, emotionally. Am I making sense? So when you think about this developmentally, it adds dimension to it. The last, 4th category, which hardly anybody gets to, by the way, is called consulting. Think about it this way. How many of you, don't raise your hands, how many of you would, on your own, ask your parents to be a consultant in your life? Most of us wouldn't. It's very fascinating. I was home one Sunday afternoon, and I got a call from my youngest child, and she said, Dad, do you have a minute? Well, when your youngest child calls you out of the blue and they're an adult, a married adult, you kind of step back and you think, oh, what's this going to be about? You know, do you need money? Is your husband leaving you? Did one of the kids die? I don't know. You know, what are we going to talk about? How am I going to rescue you, kind of thing, right? And she said, well, I went to church this morning and I got some theological questions I'd like to ask you. For the next 45 minutes to an hour, we talked theology. She did not have to call me. She trusted me enough to consult with me. And you know what it did to me? It made me cry. And so Nancy comes by and she says, what's wrong? And I said, everything's right. You know, it's not, there's nothing wrong. I was stunned that my own child would turn around and come back and say, I trust you enough for the way you raised me to help me navigate this part of my life here and now. Would you go back and ask your parents? Will they come back and ask you? If you do parenting well, it seems like to me that the trust bond in the family should be robust enough to handle that. Consultant. Consultant is where kids get launched. But if they're launched from the cop phase, they're usually angry and hurt. If they're launched from the coach phase, they do a little better, but they're still not the bond. Because the coach can't play the game with them. Consulting means that we sit down at the table and play the game together. It means that I want to be with you. I think it's what God asks of us. There's an interesting verse in Psalm 131. The Psalms of Ascent, they start actually in Psalm 120, and they go through 132 or 3 or something like that. And these are songs that were sung as people made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And when they got close to Jerusalem, Psalm 131 was sung. It's 3 verses. And the middle verse says something like a weaned child. A weaned child no longer needs its mother for milk and nourishment. And it says it twice. And when the Hebrew language emphasizes something, it says it twice. It repeats it. So it repeats like a weaned child. So it's telling you this child no longer needs its mother. It just wants to be with its mother. That's a consultant. That's trust. And God's saying to us, I want you to want me, not need me. Because I'll meet all your needs, he says. And I think that's the same thing that we long for. That's kind of the target I'm aiming at as a parent. I want my children to want to be with me. Not to have to be with me, not to feel obligated to be with me, not to show up at Christmas time, not to, but to want to be with me, to drop by and let's have a cup of tea. Let's talk about this. The other day, another one of my kids just called me out of the blue, and we just had this great conversation about a totally other subject. And I thought he could have talked to a bunch of other people about this, but he chose to talk to me. That's humbling, folks. But it comes from being able to go through these phases in some kind of orderly, significant way. Now, so we don't get lost, I would like to tell you, last night I said something like, every human being born on our planet has potential to be capable. But they're not born with the capabilities. So we're born with potential. And then our perception of ourselves determines whether we actually wind up being, feeling, acting capable. So I want to give you 3 perceptions and 4 skills that make up a healthy, robust, hearty individual. And these are researched, evidence-based, if you will. And they've been around for quite a long time. And we typically don't teach them. We teach the negatives, not the positives. And so this is the positive side. These are the things, the capabilities that you need to have. Every time I've done this with a smaller group and we've had more time to process them, we processed each one individually on a weekly basis for a while. People go away and they say, this was for me. These are the things I missed. I didn't have this. I wasn't given this. So just apply it to yourself, because I'm back to my rule of thumb at the beginning. You can't give away what you don't have. So if you want to be able to give your child a more robust, healthy, hearty, life-giving, joy-filled, productive, however you want to frame it, healthy, whole experience, then you've got to be able to experience some of that yourself. So that means you have to do your own work. And I think this program you've been in, the series you're in at the church here, it's designed to help you probe some of that in your own life so that you can detoxify it. Maybe a good way to describe this is if I was in a regular sized room, I could bring a small box of balloons in. Let's say if I was in a regular sized room, 10 by 10, and I just brought a shoebox full of balloons. That doesn't take up much space, just a shoebox, but it's full of balloons. And then if I blow all the balloons up, I inflate them. Listen to the language I'm using. I inflate them all. I think I could have enough balloons to fill up that whole room. I mean, if you really want to have some fun with your kids, fill their room full of balloons. See what they do. They can't surprise them. They're asleep. Fill a room with balloons. See what happens. I don't know. What? Okay, don't do that. But each balloon is inflated. Now listen to me carefully. Trauma inflates the balloons. Distorted perceptions inflate the balloons. Misunderstandings inflate the balloons. Misconnections. When you think you're saying one thing and the kid's saying the other one. And Nancy and I one time were invited to a party, and she was in the bathroom getting ready, and I was dressing in the bedroom, and then we crossed because I needed to go to the bathroom and she needed to come get clothes or something, and it was obvious. We met in the living room, and it was obvious we were not going to the same party. You ever done that? Something like that? I mean, you just totally misperception. She thought it was this kind of a party. I thought it was this kind of a party, and might have well been a costume party for all the difference it made. I mean, it was just goofy, right? What have we done? We just completely missed. Because she thought she had read it this way, I thought she'd read it this way. We had a couple at church ask us to come over. I swear it was dinner, and she swore it was for dinner. And we got to their house, and we talked for a long time, and no dinner. And we tried to smell something cooking, and in fact, we talked on the way over there. We thought maybe it was chicken, or maybe it would be, maybe hamburgers. I don't know, But we didn't smell anything. And finally, the gal got up and she said, "I'm going to go get the parfaits ready." Nancy and I could not look at each other. On the way home, we stopped by the store and got a can of soup and some crackers and survived that night. But I mean, it was just, we both swore, and we'd like to. Just recently we were talking about that, and I said, I'd like to meet them again if they're still alive and find out what they thought about that evening, because it obviously was not what the message we got. And we swear, they asked her and they asked me separately. So that's misperception, all right? So, yeah, okay. So 3 things that you need to perceive accurately. And here's one of the things I would say about that. So that you kind of understand what I'm talking about when I talk about perception. It goes something like this. If you think you can, you will. And if you think you can't, you won't. So out of a child's eyes, a lot of times you don't know whether they can or can't, My middle daughter has a lot of words. She's a talker. That's the way she calms her anxiety. She talks. And that's not bad or good. That's just her. And she was learning how to swim as a kid. And so she wanted to go off the high dive, or that swim coach wanted her to go off the high dive. And so she crawled up, but she couldn't. I bet she crawled up that thing 6 times. She could not bring herself to jump off. And he wouldn't push her. He just kept trying to invite her to do that. And I watched him. And one of the interesting things that he did, she finally hung from the high dive, which was like, 6 feet. I don't know what it was, but for her it was forever. And she dropped, and she survived, and then she wanted to do it again. Pretty soon you couldn't stop her from doing it. She looked like a, egg beater. But he did a very interesting thing. There was another challenging task in that swimming thing, and she didn't want to do it because she was afraid. I didn't know whether she was afraid of failing or she was just afraid of the event, or who knows. She was insecure about it. It was new, and, she had to take a risk, and that's life, isn't it? And that's the way things go. And so I listened to him as he talked to her, and he said, "Remember when you were hanging from that diving board and finally dropped? How did you feel? How is this different?" So he coached her emotionally to remember how she felt, because he said, "This is the same thing. Nothing's different. It's a different behavior, but I'm asking you to do a different task, but the feeling inside of you is the same. And you conquered it once. Let's bring that forward into this event." So that's emotional coaching is what that's called. And I watched him do it, and I watched her respond to it. Interesting. That's a perception. Perception is, if we think we can, we will. If we think we can't, we won't. And all that stands between ourselves and our capabilities are our perceptions of who we are and what we can do. That's all that stands. And that's why perception becomes so significant. You can change your perception. You can take those balloons that fill that room that are inflated by all these negative experiences, or really horrible experiences, or painful experiences, or hurtful experiences, or even the feeling of abandonment. Maybe, like I said earlier, if your parents died, that's not your fault, and it wasn't their fault, and nobody's being mean, but the impact on you as a child who doesn't have the capacity to manage that, to process that in some way and disarm that, that's likely to blow up those balloons. You want to disarm the balloons? Then it seems like to me one of the things that you need to be able to do is you need to realize that your perception is the determiner of whether that balloon stays full of air or not. You can't get rid of the balloon. It actually happens. Your parents did die. That's the truth. That's the balloon. If the balloon's inflated, that's a distortion of that truth. Did I say that too fast? Do I need to do that again? You okay? No, yes? Do it again. I just love doing it again. I can't remember what I said just a minute ago, so you're really pushing me now. No, think about it this way. If a child's parents died, that's a pretty significant event. These are two caretakers. They brought them into life, and now they're gone. It's not uncommon, by the way. Okay, so then what happens? Every child's going to perceive that differently. But for most children, they can't understand the dynamics of that, and so sometimes in the family they don't know how to grieve, so they will suppress it. They will pretend that it didn't happen, or they say everything's okay, or it's going to be fine when you're hurting like crazy and nobody just lets you hurt. It's like a child that's mad at his sister, and it's okay for them to be mad. It's great for you to be mad. Be mad. It's fine. Just don't act on it. You have a choice. But perception is the key to this whole thing. And so the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So if you think you're wounded, you're stuck. Actually, your parents dying don't directly wound you. They just set up the context to be different. And so one of the things that we have to do when we grow up is we have to be able to deflate the balloons, not to get rid of the balloons. It's to recognize the balloons for what they are and then keep them the size they're designed to be so that you can go back and talk about it if you need. But most of us have inflated those because we've played the same tune over and over again, and each time we play it, the balloon gets bigger and takes up more space. Perception is really unique. So I have a water bottle here. And if you looked at this water bottle, it has a cap, and the cap is this size. None of you were bothered by the cap just a minute ago. I wasn't either. But if I close my left eye and I stick this cap right up here, what happens? What do I see? Just the cap. I see a little bit of my hand, some of the table over here. That's it. If I move it out here, I see a few of you. Most of you are still gone. If I put it back over here, that doesn't change size. Look at what happens. What happens is where it is in my perceptual field determines how loud or big or intrusive or compelling it is. And so most people will take a hurt and put it right here, and then it gets in the way of seeing everything. You can't get rid of that. That stills the reality. That's the balloon. So where that is in your perceptual field makes a difference. You can always go back, pick it up, and we can talk about it. My parents died when I was young. I'm not even sure all the ramifications of that at my age now, but still, it's amazing to me. My parents have been dead for a long time, and so has Nancy's. And we still find fertile conversations about how they raised us and about who they were and about the impact that they have on our lives. Why? Because it stays evergreen. It's the way, it's part of your storyline, but it doesn't determine who you are. Your perception determines who you are. And you can change your perception. Listen to this. At about page 8, or maybe page 8, about age 8, the developing human has an increasingly importance placed on perception. So up to that point, perception doesn't weigh quite as heavily in a way that we can change them, but from that point on, their perception is the key to what they are and what they do. So if, as a parent, one of the challenges for you as a coach or a cop is to read the child well, work it hard at understanding them, because here's the rule: all behavior is caused. There's never a behavior that happens that's not caused by something. It might be caused by indigestion. It might be caused by a bad perception. It might be caused by woundedness. It might be caused by fear. It might be caused by, but it's caused by something. There's something that causes this. It might be, you might be dehydrated. It doesn't really matter. We sometimes believe that what we see determines what we think, but the opposite is true. What we think determines what we see. Shall I do that again? We sometimes think that what we see determines what we think, but the opposite's true. What we think determines what we see. Ideas have absolutely no meaning except the meaning we give them. Your perception, my perception, what we pay attention to is what leads us. So to have a perception that's sensitive and that we're conscious about really does matter. So you'll find some people have horrible experiences and they're not traumatized by them. And you find other people that have very mild experiences and they're wildly traumatized by them. It's not the experience that traumatizes you, it's the perception of it. PTSD in all its forms, which is very popular right now. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that reality is a perceptual issue. And you can find out how robust and hardy and resilient people are based on that. So perception matters. Here's an idea. You can revise your history, you can change your present circumstances, and you can transcend your parents and teachers, all by changing your perceptions. As a parent, if you try to change behavior of a child without changing their perception, it only encourages the expression of new behaviors reflecting firmly entrenched perceptions. In other words, the only way that we really are changed, transformed, if you will, is by shifting the way we see something. And think of something in your own life that you've done that with. You thought it was this way, and now you think it's that way. Last night I told the story of a teenager that thought he was responsible for the death of their family dog, and he wasn't. And he didn't know any. He carried that perception for 10 years until he sat at this table and it came up in a random kind of a way. And he was stunned, but guess what? His perception changed. And he was still kind of talking about it at the end of the evening in a good way. For the first time, he was able to release himself from being responsible for something that he couldn't be responsible for. And a lot of kids, by the way, any kid that's violated will feel somewhat of responsibility for being violated. Like, I deserve this. It wouldn't have happened to me if I didn't deserve it. Which is faulty thinking, by the way, but it's also common, especially in a child who can't process in isolation. They can only. That's why it's so important to have family around to be able to process this stuff with, and to be able to push this out into the light. I remember we had one of my children's friends over for dinner, and we were talking. A normal conversation for us was we were all interrupting each other and all talking at the same time. So. And she didn't have that kind of experience at her house, and she left the dinner table, and she was gone a long time, and I thought, that's wonky. Where'd she go? So I got up from the table to find her, and she was sitting on one of my kids' beds back in the bedroom. And I sat down next to her, and I said, hey, what's going on? And slowly, it came out that the way we were talking scared her, because when her family talked like that, it got violent. And we were just raucously enjoying one another. And she had misread it because of her experience. Perception matters, folks. So here's the three perceptions that everybody needs. And the first one is, we need to perceive that we're a capable people. We have personal capacity. We have the ability, if you will, to, let's see, I wrote this down here somewhere, to be able to say, I am capable, I can do this. Now, some people are overconfident, some people are underconfident. Okay. However, you need to be pulled forward. And how you learn competence is that you make a mistake, and then you get better at it. And so somebody asked me, I've remodeled 2 houses, and I've rebuilt engines in a car and a few other things, and they say, how'd you learn all that? And I said, by making mistakes. So the way I learned most mechanical things is I had to buy 2 of everything. One to learn on and one to do it right? I remember I replaced a diode plate in an alternator, and then I learned later that the minute you turn it on, if the diode plate's backwards, it'll burn out the diodes instantly, just split second. And so then you have to go buy a new diode plate. So there it is, 2, right? I bought 2 diode plates, and then I fixed the alternator. Do you think I'm going to make that mistake again? Probably not, I'll let somebody else do it. I'll never do it again. No, anyway. The point is, how do you learn if you can't say, well, I think maybe I can do that. Let's give it a shot, Now, if you're a motor moron and can't plug in a toaster, maybe you need to try working in some other area. I mean, we're not all created equal that way, so relax, Maybe you read books better than take apart cars. But my dad got a little upset with me when I was younger because I took the carburetor off of his car. I just wanted to see how it worked. I had strong sense of personal capability. Where did I get that? Well, I was allowed to fail in my upbringing. I was allowed to experiment. I was allowed, my mother taught me how to cook. And so my grandmother taught me how to cook. And then so that's why I cook today. Partly because they not only allowed it, but encouraged it. And, if what I made came out burnt, they went and got some more flour and we made another one. Anyway, okay. So the second perception of healthy people is that they have strong, strong perceptions of significance in personal relationships. And that means that I contribute in meaningful ways and I'm genuinely needed. There's a funny little story about that I had somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, shoot. It was about Linus going to school and in the Peanuts cartoon, and Lucy asked him something like, how was school today? And he said, well, I don't know. I didn't go. And she said, well, I thought you went. He said, well, I did. I opened the door and I said, am I needed? And nobody answered. He said, so I came home. Children need to feel needed. We all do. When people ask you to help them, most people will respond to that request. If you ask me, if you tell me to do something, I'm likely to resist you. If you ask me, I'm likely to respond, right? If you say, can you help me with this? I'm kind of stuck and I need another set of hands. And when you feel like you're making a contribution, it makes a difference. And so I taught all my kids how to cook. They all bake now. They all make rolls. I made my kids wedding cakes, etc. Why? So we could participate in the relational dynamic of the family. It's not to make the cake. That's not the point. The point is to be in relationship with somebody, doing life together in a more full-orbed way. Perception that I make a difference. I'm capable and I'm needed. I need you to take the trash out. I need you to do the dishes if I take the trash out. I need you to help me with this. If we're going to accomplish this, we need to work in it together. I need you to hold that while I do this. I contribute in meaningful ways to this family. Thank you for mashing the potatoes. I don't know, whatever. Okay. Third one. Third strong perception is having power or influence over life. I can influence what happens to me. So here's a way to think about these. The first one is I'm capable. The second one is I'm significant. I'm needed. And the third one is I have agency. Agency means that I have influence. I can make a difference. Hey, where would you like to go for dinner? Let's go to, I don't know, whatever the thing is, Taco Bell, McDonald's, something. We used to go to Taco Drano, I think we called it, and it was awful. But anyway, can the kids help you determine that? And when they know that you're responding to their request and they're not just always doing adult things, it's a different ballgame, right? Because they're part of the family now, they need to share in this process. Now, it's tough if you're going to move or change jobs or you're forced out of a place or somebody gets sick or, there's lots of things that you can't influence directly, but you can influence pieces of that along the way, and you need to listen to a kid because they're part of it. And there was a guy that was working overseas. He was an expat working in an overseas thing, and he wanted to protect his children. Listen to the language I'm using. He wanted to protect his children from the pain of making a move because his company had moved him from one country to another country in Europe. And so he had the movers come after the kids went to school, and when they came home, he put them in a car, and off they went to this other country. They didn't get to say goodbye to their friends. Do you think they were impacted by that? Well, of course. If he'd done it well, he would have had parties for his kids' friends to say goodbye. It's not that they would have not left, but he took the influence away from them, I guess would be the way to say it. Here's what happens, and here's maybe the rule of thumb that you need to know about these perceptions of significance and capability and agency. Most of us as adults don't feel much agency. We don't feel like we can affect change in things. We're not sure that, one of us makes all the money decisions, or one of us decides how to decorate the place, or whatever. It's just all that kind of stuff. The key to this, it seems like to me, is to be able to say, your perception matters, your perspective matters, you count in some way. And everybody wants to count. We want to feel like we're significant. We want to feel like we can make a difference in some way. And so I think we underplay this too much. And we don't give people agency, and we shut them down. And I'd say it this way, in most marriages, we stop this kind of activity within a couple years usually because we don't have models that allow us to wrestle with things. And I think we're designed to wrestle with whatever shows up on our screen. And wrestling is a very personal sport, and it's a very intense sport, and it's almost the shortest sport, I think, time-wise, of any sport on the planet. Wrestling is what the word Israel means, people who wrestle with God. And we're to be God wrestlers, and then we're to learn how to wrestle with one another. So real good, close contact wrestling means that we're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. And sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you just have to stand together and wait. But you can make that decision with agency, if you will. So many people don't have agency in our world. Now, perceptions that I've talked about so far is a way to perceive something, a way to look at something, a way to see it. And you can shift from seeing it as a negative to a positive. You can see those things. You can change the way trauma happens. I was asked a question not too long ago by an audience, and one of the guys in the audience said, what if you have a horrific background and it's still impacting you today and it triggers you all the time and you were deeply wounded emotionally? And I said, the only thing I can tell you is that whatever is past, you can't change. That's not an idle statement. Everything that's past, you can't change. It's really hard to stay focused on what you can change. And that means this moment forward, not backwards. And so what I said is, are you being violated right now just because you're triggered? Well, the answer is no. But if you feel like you are, or it appears to be the same, or I'm afraid it's going to occur again, that's different than it actually happening. And that means you can have agency in this moment and deal with it in a different way. Okay, so the next things are skills. Skills can be taught. Anybody can learn skills. Most people just don't have these skills. Here they are. First one is strong intra-personal skills. That means relationship with yourself. I can't say enough about this. I think in my business, one of the things that I see most frequently in people is they have a lousy relationship with themselves. Comes in lots of packages. I don't know myself very well. I think I do, or I hide, or I'm afraid to feel a certain way. One thing I like to ask men a lot of times is, when was the last time you cried? Real tears, and cried, and what did you cry about? Now, some men cry a lot, so, it doesn't work that way. It's not just about men. I just like to ask men that. Because most of them go, when the baseball team imploded, and they blew up second base or something, I don't know, but are you aware of who you are? Intrapersonal skill. One of my, I think Terrence said it in my thing, I'm most interested in how people do interior work, how they look at their own soul, how they understand their own dynamic, how they represent their own history, how they know who they are, who they're made out of, what their strengths are. And, all of us through life, for a long time, we test all kinds of things along, but you get a little bit older, and that ought to converge into something that says, this is you, not somebody else. I have lots of gifts, but there are only a few that really give me life. And now I know that, but I'm old, so I'm ahead of most of you that way. But I think that the other idea is you can do it now. You can learn about yourself now. Intrapersonal skills, the ability to understand your emotions and to use that understanding to develop discipline and control of yourself, and to how to learn from experience. I don't want to do this again. I firmly believe that you can be in a relationship, but you can't be in a relationship and not hurt the other person. I'm so sorry to say that. You don't have to be intentional about it. You're just going to hurt the other person simply because you're different. And you see different things, and you get stuck. And so what do you do with the hurt? Some of us come into a relationship with hurt unresolved or unidentified, and we don't even know it's there, and then we overreact to things that are going on in our lives. And you can't, here I go again, you can't give to your kids what they need if you can't do this work in your own internal life. How do you identify these interior pain points and do something with them? Bring them out into the light and sift them and see what's left and deflate that aspect of your life that's been so big that it's taken over a big chunk of your life, and you can't even talk about it. There's some things that people just have hard time even talking about because they represent so much pain. Much of what happened in World War II when people came home from fighting World War II, those guys didn't talk about it. Now pushing it down is like sticking a beach ball underwater in a pool. It's going to pop up sometime. It's just almost impossible to stick that beach ball and sit on it long enough. Something's going to move. Eventually it'll pop up. And I just say, seek it out so you can see what it is, and then you can deflate it. Intrapersonal skills, I'll read it again. The ability to understand personal emotions, to develop self-discipline, self-control, learn from experience. One of the biggest issues today is dysregulated people that can't regulate their own emotional world. And so most guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you again, most guys are very good at anger and irritability and not much else in terms of emotion. And I'd say let's broaden it somehow. Let's soften it. Let's identify the softer side of the emotional world. Let's find out, why am I so afraid to feel vulnerable? All right. Fifth one, strong interpersonal skills, T-E-R instead of T-R-A. This is relationships with other people. Now, look at what I've done here. We're at number 5 out of 7, and the first 4 had to do with what's going on with the individual inside, not other people. It's the development of the soul of the individual person. Each child is unique. You do not own a child. They're not yours by rights. You just have them for a season. A lot of people hold on to their kids as if their kids are theirs. And if the kid acts up, then they think it's their fault. Or if the kid, does some wonky thing, they take responsibility for it. It's not your responsibility. You have to ache for the kid. One of my kids came home, they'd flunked algebra, I think it was, and they thought I'd be mad at them. And they said, "Why aren't you mad?" And I said, "Why would I be mad? I passed algebra." Bummer, you're going to have to take it again. I hope you know. Can I help you? By the way, I don't remember passing, but, I'll get you a tutor or something, And to this day, they talk about that event because they expected me to be upset. But I was able to differentiate myself from them. I could separate myself from who they were. And so I said, "Oh, my goodness, you need some help here." Okay, so the fifth one is interpersonal skills, the ability to work with others, to develop friendships through communication, to cooperate, to negotiate, to share, to empathize, to listen. How am I doing? The things that are needed for us to connect with other human beings means that we have these skills in tow. Listen to them. Communication, cooperation, negotiation, sharing, empathizing, and listening. Maybe the hardest is the last one. Maybe they ought to go backwards. Listening is a tough thing. And here's what I was going to tell you just a second ago. One of the major pieces of this puzzle, from my point of view, is realizing that the more relational you are, the more messy your world will be. This is not about streamlining your world. Healthy people make a mess. If you come to my house and I fix a meal for you, guess what? I'm going to make a mess. Even if I fix a processed meal, I got a bunch of garbage to throw away. If I can get to the meal because of the packaging, that's always a challenge, right? Just getting packaging out. But if I make a meal for you, I'm going to make a mess to do it. If I make you a chair or a bed or something in my wood shop, then I'm going to make a mess to make that. You can't avoid the mess. Don't try to clean this up. Try to figure out a way to help this be more robust in terms of the substance of relationship and the connections. Okay, the 6th one is you need systemic skills, as one person calls it. Systemic skills are the ability to respond to the limits and consequences of everyday life. So there's limits and consequences. And I said last night, didn't I, something about consequences? Nature does not have reward and punishment. It only has consequences. You can control the environment. You can help a child identify the need to deal with consequences. That's what this systemic skills is, that I can deal with the limits and consequences of everyday life. I can be responsible, I can adapt, I can be flexible, I can have integrity. We want not to have the messiness of having to adapt, but adaptation is one of the marks of a healthy person. Humans are amazingly adaptive physically. I mean, we can go from the Arctic to the subtropics, and it's amazing how the human can adapt to those things. I had a friend of mine that got his PhD and was working in the Arctic, and it was 60 below zero, and he worked without his gloves on. I said, "How'd you do that?" He said, "Well, you get used to it." All right, the last one. Another skill that you can learn is judgmental skills, the ability to use wisdom and to evaluate situations based on values. So motivation, beliefs, attitudes, these things are the product of those 7 things I've just listed. Significance, capable, agency, relationship with yourself, relationship with others, relationship to the context you're in, and then relationship in the ability to make decisions. I'm done. So I'm going to be rescued here in just a minute.
All right. Well, since you have weak systemic skills, there are consequences. So, which means
I
that,
can't tell time is what he's trying to
yeah.
say, you know.
So you left very little time. So here are the consequences. We're gonna. I didn't bring the questions with me because we don't have real much time for them.
That's okay.
So what we're gonna try and do is find some other format to answer those questions and get them published. I don't know when or how, but we're going to work real hard to try and make time to get to those questions so that they can get answered. So we're going to put the QR code back up. You can submit questions on your way out, and then I'll take the archive of questions from yesterday and the questions from tonight, and we'll try and maybe have a dialogue.
You and I can talk about them
We'll
later.
have a dialogue where we can discuss those. So there was one question from tonight that I think we can spend a little time
Okay.
toying with our few minutes. Somebody asked, what do you think of the gentle parenting movement? Now, before you comment, so two things. One, the gentle parenting movement is the most widely misunderstood conceptually movement in like all of what it means to be a parent. The gentle parenting movement is actually all of its hallmarks are based on everything that he said tonight. So the key hallmarks of the gentle parenting movement are empathy, consequences without harshness, boundaries without harshness, development, and what happens is on social media or in really crappy articles written on this subject, it gets distilled down to one of those things instead of all of those things. And what you end up having with the gentle parenting movement is people with low emotional bandwidth attempt it, they get tired of it, and so then they become critical of it because they're only leaning into one or two bullet points. Or number two, what it turns into is lots of negotiation with no consequences. And that is not what that movement intended to be. So, I just want to provide that requisite framework, and then you tell me where you think this thing goes wonky.
I have an interest in, I think I mentioned it last night, interest in parenting books over time. So my parents had a set of books, I got them, and then we had a go-to set of books, and then the next couple generations, so I've lived through about 5 iterations of this. They have a tendency to swing back and forth, but one of the things about the word gentle is really helpful and can allow you to get through it quicker than almost anything else. Is the word gentle in Scripture means only the strong can be gentle. And I think it's misunderstood as weakness or passivity or passive aggressiveness in some way. And I don't want my poor child to have any pain in their life, any struggle in their life, any challenge in their life. And I'm sorry. We need challenge to grow. You know, have you heard the story about the butterfly? You know, if you help the butterfly out of the cocoon, he can't fly because you're helping him. And the butterfly has to fight out of that cocoon to have strong enough wings structure to fly. And I think we rob our kids a lot of times because we think one side or the other of the equation. So you need limits, loving limits, you know. And so Klein and Fay, which I put up here last night, they have written all these books called Love and Logic. And it's how God treats us. And it's the Hebrew word in the Old Testament is hesed, which actually means loving, and then
Kindness.
loyalty. It doesn't mean loving and kindness are the same sentiment.
Yeah.
So loving, and then it has a judgmental side, which is the loyalty or the limit side. So you have both of those coming at you from
Oh, I
the
see
God
what
who
you're
loves
saying.
us.
So when most people say covenantal love, what you're saying is loyalty and love
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Hesed means.
Yeah.
The word means. And it's the Old Testament word about God. God's love for us is this unfathomable love, but it has boundaries. And you will rob your kids. If you do not have boundaries to your kids, you are actually abusing them. I can't say it stronger than that. Now, you can have just boundaries and no love, and that's abuse as well. So, but kids need to know their limits, because if you grow up without limits, guess what? You have addiction, and you have chaos, and you have inability to connect, and on and on and on you go. So,
Let's see. I can remember one other question. Somebody asked, and I think this is something that we all can relate to. I really struggle, like, getting angry at my children. In other words, I overdo it on the anger side when they misbehave or when they rebel or when they violate those limits. I end up, responding with pretty fierce anger or even just mild anger. What can I do about that? That was the question.
I thought as a good Christian parent, I should control my kids, and so that's how I tried. I tried to do that, and I tried to do it with power. I'd bully them in a sense. I'd power up. Now, I never beat my kids. That wasn't the issue. That's not the issue. But I would yell and be angry, etc. What I would say today is anger covers up fear. Most of the time when you're angry, what you're covering up is you're afraid. You're afraid you're out of control. You're afraid they're out of control. You're afraid you don't know how to control them. You're afraid the situation's out of control in some way.
Afraid how people will perceive you as a parent.
Yes, just that whole cascading list. And I would say, here's a hint, if you can capture it. You can practice this as a skill, folks. Every time you're mad, stop. The minute you're aware that you're angry, I don't care whether it's with your kids or your spouse or your boss, it doesn't matter. Stop and say, I need to move mad to sad. Sad gives you a platform to show up. Mad forces you into an adversarial position. God wants to restore us. And so it says, Jesus was a man of sorrows, sad, acquainted with grief. Why? That comes out of Isaiah, and it's telling you this Jesus who comes is sad about this brokenness in the world, and his anger is not toward us. His anger is toward the dysfunction. And so the only way to have us function well is to be sad. And I would say, somebody asked me, what's my main emotion? I would say it's sadness. I don't act sad most of the time, but I am grieved most of the time by all the dysfunction that's unnecessary, that we get stuck in our perceptions, and we will not do the work to change those perceptions. You can change your narrative, folks. You can. God's narrative of you should always trump your narrative, because he sees you radically different than you see you. And the more you can get those aligned over time, the more free you'll be, and the more at ease you'll be. And sad is the doorway into that freedom. Wow.
Last question that I can
said
remember.
that?
We'll end on this question, and it's kind of and it's kind of a doozy to end on, but
come on.
Well,
You're used to
I
this.
know. So here's the question. But there's a general principle in here. It's a specific question with a general thing in it.
Okay.
The specific question is how do I restore a relationship to an adult child? Because when they were young, I had to leave them behind when I immigrated to the United States and wasn't able to be reunited to them until years later. And so now there's some sort of adversarial relationship on the other side of that. How do you heal that rift? And I know that's really complicated, not being able to talk to either person. and knowing all of the context. But I think the more general principle is if you have an estranged relationship with your adult children because of choices that you made as a parent when they were young, is it over?
Never.
Can we heal that? And what are some of the steps that we can take to heal that if we feel like maybe we missed the mark when our kids were young?
Okay, number one, I would say the purpose of forgiveness, which is the best single gift, tool God's given us in Scripture relationally. And as a parent, you've got to be able to forgive yourself for the stuff you do with your kid. And if you got to start there. And forgiveness is for you, not for the other person ever. It's always for you. Reconciliation is the thing you're talking about. How do I reconcile this rift?
Say that again. Forgiveness is for me. Reconciliation is you
Is
can't
between the two
control
of us.
reconciliation,
Right.
but I can control forgiveness.
And most people misunderstand that, just radically misunderstand that. We think that forgiveness is, if I forgive you, then I'm letting you off the hook. No, I'm taking care of my own soul. That's the intrapersonal side. The reconciliation, here's the key. Reconciliation has two sides to it, perpetrator and victim. So whoever's the victim, whoever's the perpetrator, both of them have a responsibility to build the bridge between them. And you have to play by the rules or you can't get there. So there's a great book out called How Can I Forgive You? The Courage to Forgive and the Freedom Not to, and it's by Janice Spring. And it radicalized my view of reconciliation. Half of the book is about that. And she calls what we call reconciliation, she calls genuine forgiveness. Now the point is, it's conditional. But forgiveness of yourself is unconditional. And I think it's very few of us forgive ourselves. So if you can't forgive yourself, then you can't give away, here we go again, you can't give away something that you don't have yourself. Please do the work to let yourself off the hook, because God's doing a work in you to give you access to that freedom. And the way you do it is you have to forgive yourself. I had to leave for whatever reasons. They could have been totally wrong, but I did. Now, how do I reconcile that? How do I heal that? Well, the healing comes when I invite you here and I work out of my own failure or finiteness, I guess would be the better way to say it. And I take ownership and I just say, well, that was then, this is now. I want a relationship with you now. How can we do this? I give you one quick example. It's not quick, but I'll do it quick.
It has to be.
It has to be. I'm hurrying, just for the kids. Had a client that was violated by her father, and then her father wanted back into her life later. And he was very contrite about it. He said, I was wrong. I'll never be right. I can't make it up to you. I violated you. It shouldn't have happened. You know, where can we go from here? And she said, well, you know, these are the rules you have to play by. So that's the reconciling side. These are the rules you have to play by. And he said, I'll do anything, and I'll take whatever you can give me. And so he did. And she could never let him fully in. She said, I just can't trust you. And he said, I get it. I gave it up. I lost my dad license. You know, I don't deserve to be in your life at all. So he kept coming out of it from contriteness. And over time, they continued to build a bridge. Now, it's still a toll bridge. It's a costly bridge. You can't just run across it without regard for the other person because there's too much wound, right? I have to walk with a limp, if you will. But it's so descriptive of that's what we're made to do. We're made to reconcile with one another, regardless of the context. So the resources that the scriptures give you are deep, fundamental, foundational, and freeing.
I'm going to pray for you all. Before I pray, this man is very relational and really talkative. So as much as I would love to have you guys rush the stage and ask him questions, for the sake of our team members who want to go home and lock up,
Who don't want to hear that.
we can't do that tonight, okay? So if you have a question, you can scan the QR code, and then maybe, hopefully, we can get to it. in some other format where I interview them and get those questions answered. Father God, this work is challenging, it is difficult, but it is possible. It is possible because we have not only the requisite tools after these last couple nights, but we have the Holy Spirit who goes with us to enable us, to convict us, to encourage us, to equip us, and to comfort us when we fail, and we will. But you will not. And so, Lord, help us to show up. That's our job. And your job is to show off. I pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, everybody.